Okay, so let's talk about this AfDB $11 billion range. If you've been keeping an eye on the global development landscape lately, you've probably noticed the vibe. Let's call it control panic between massive donor fatigue in the West and tightening domestic budgets. The old school model of wealthy nations writing checks to help everyone else is basically on life support. But as the obituary for the traditional aid is being drafted, the African Development Bank gasped, pulling off an $11 billion raise for its Africa Development Fund. This has been its largest raise in the fund's history. And for context, the last cycle was 8.9 billion. And now it's 11 billion from this cycle. And then now what gets my attention is where the money came from and how this is a strong signal that the tectonic plates of the global finance may have officially shifted or may be shifting. Let me explain. I think the first point is what I call a shift to the east. For decades, the African Development Fund relied on the global north's generosity, but with the US and the crisis in Ukraine, that really shifted a lot of European attention. So there's been a lot of slashing for aid. But let's take a look at who brought the checkbook this time for the ADF, which is the African Development Fund. The Arab Bank of Economic Development in Africa came through with 800 million US dollars. Then the OPEC Fund for International Development splashed 2 billion US dollars. Are we watching a shift to the east? Is this the future? Is the future of African infrastructure really that's the roads, the grids, the fiber? Will that be fueled by Arab and South-South partnerships rather than the transatlantic relationships? Is this the change we're seeing? A second thing about this raise that is really worthy of mention is the fact that it seems that there's some more skin in the game from African nations. This stat actually gives me goosebumps because African countries increase their own contributions fivefold, pledging $182.7 million. And we have 19 countries contributing for the very first time. I think this indicates a huge psychological shift. Africa will be built now by Africans. It's hard to keep calling it foreign aid when your neighbors are the ones putting up the capital. And would this affect how funds are managed? Being that we are becoming a continental community invested in our collective development? And my hope is yes. So the third thing is, hello, Wall Street. One major change for the ADF this time is pivoting to bond issuing model. Now this is a major governance shift for the fund. The fund is now allowed to borrow money on capital markets. Now, this is a model similar to the World Bank's IDA. That's the World Bank's International Development Association. This improves management and reporting standards, with the fund basically acting more like a Wall Street investment house than a charity just giving out money. More so, there's the expectation that bond issuing will raise an additional $5 billion in funding from the capital markets in 3 years. Okay, talking business. So when we put this together, right, it's hard to ignore the signal. The development finance isn't going away. The players, though, are changing. The real question is, what does it mean for the entrenched rules of the game? And what gets abandoned, what gets introduced, and who is going to adapt fast enough to matter? So go to comment sections. Let's hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think. But I think it's interesting, the changes that are happening in real time.